You need to get that black guy out of here right now. Those words hissed through Carlos's walkie-talkie like venom, and I swear to you I can still hear them ringing in my ears, because in that moment I realized I wasn't just invisible to him, I was disposable. He wasn't even subtle, standing there in the middle of the Grand Palace lobby, straightening his tie for the 10th time in 5 minutes while his eyes drilled into the Chinese businessman walking toward the elevators. This billionaire surrounded by his entourage of polished suits. And Carlos thought the only thing that might ruin his precious deal was me, the janitor with the broom. Yeah, that happened, and it still stings when I replay it. So there we were, this guy Mr. Liwai, real estate magnate, owned towers across Asia, marching across the marble like he owned it, which, in a way, he did, and Carlos had been sweating bullets for weeks waiting for this moment. 300 million on the line. That's what his boss told him, all but guaranteed if he didn't screw it up. And of course he screwed it up in record time. The handshake was fake warm, the smile plastered on, and not 30 seconds later Liwai leaned to his team and started rattling off something in Mandarin, sharp, fast, the kind of tone that makes your stomach drop even if you don't understand a word. Carlos froze like a deer on a highway, pulling out his phone like it was a lifeline, fingers fumbling on Google Translate, and when the screen spat out nonsense about hot fish problem, dirty water business, one of the executives snorted, trying not to laugh. Now here's where the irony cuts deep, because I understood every single word coming out of Liwai's mouth. I'd spent years buried in textbooks, chasing a degree in international business, nights memorizing tax codes, mornings repeating Mandarin phrases until my tongue ached, all for a future I thought I'd already lost. 143 job applications, 24 interviews where I came in second, until the only offer left was sweeping floors in the same hotel that boasted about global excellence, while pretending men like me didn't exist. My father worked double shifts mixing cement so I could walk a stage in a cap and gown, and every day I dragged that cart through the lobby, I could feel his disappointment pressing on my shoulders. You know what I mean? That morning, a few hours before the whole circus began, Carlos had pulled the cleaning crew into the basement and told us, "I want all of you invisible today. This client is worth more than your entire salaries combined." He looked right at me when he said it, like my presence alone might contaminate the chandelier light. "Especially you, Joao. Don't let him see you." I just nodded, because what else do you do when the boss thinks you're furniture? But as I watched him drown in mistranslations, sweat dripping onto his phone, I felt something in me shift, because what Liwai was asking about wasn't carpets or facilities. He was demanding clarity on Brazilian regulations for foreign capital, corporate structures, international tax compliance. That was my language, my bread and butter, knowledge I'd carried like a secret weight for years, and suddenly I realized I was holding the one rope that could pull this meeting back from the cliff. At one point, Liwai checked his watch and muttered to his team they'd give 10 more minutes before walking. That's when I stopped pushing the cart, peeled off my gloves, and walked forward. Every step echoed louder than it should have, like the building itself knew something was about to snap. Carlos didn't even look up until I cleared my throat. "Excuse me," I said, calm but firm, and he snapped, "Joao, not now, get out." I didn't move. "Actually," I said, "I can help with the translation." The lobby went silent, like every clock stopped ticking at once. Carlos blinked at me, rage and confusion fighting for space on his face. But I turned to Liwai and slipped into Mandarin as smoothly as I'd practiced in the quiet corners of my apartment. "Mr. Liwai, I apologize for the confusion. Please allow me to address your concerns." His eyes widened, first suspicion, then curiosity, then something close to respect. He tested me with a question about the latest tax amendments for foreign hotel investment, and I answered without hesitation, pointing out how the revisions actually worked in his favor. His associates leaned in, nodding, and the energy in the room flipped. Carlos just stood there, jaw slack, phone dangling in his hand like a useless toy. "Who is this man?" Liwai asked in English. Carlos mumbled, He's with cleaning." Liwai raised his brows. "A janitor who speaks Mandarin and understands international law, that is unusual." And I smiled, because unusual was exactly what they'd called me my whole life. Only this time it wasn't an insult, it was leverage. Inside the conference room, I opened the notebook I'd been building quietly for months: case studies, market analyses, profiles of Liwi's company and I laid it out on the table like a magician finally revealing his cards. Every answer I gave, every regulation I cited, pulled the meeting tighter into focus, and Liwi kept firing questions like a man testing the edges of a blade. Carlos tried to butt in, to steer it back toward the dull presentation slides he'd prepared, but Liwi waved him off. "I prefer to continue with Mr. Santos," he said, and just like that the power dynamic flipped forever. Here's the twist nobody expected halfway through. One of Liwi's senior advisors, a woman named May who had barely spoken until then, leaned toward me in Mandarin and asked about a zoning conflict in Shanghai that mirrored one of our pending projects. She wanted to know if Brazil had a similar loophole, and when I laid out a comparison complete with timelines and precedents, she smiled, really smiled, for the first time that morning. Later I'd find out she carried as much weight in the decision as Liwi himself, and in that moment, she was the one who decided I belonged at the table. Sometimes the people you think are just shadows in the room turn out to be the ones pulling the strings. By the end, Liwi wasn't just back on board, made it a condition of his investment that I be promoted immediately, put in charge of all international communications. Carlos nodded through gritted teeth, pretending to agree, but his eyes told the story of a man watching his entire ladder of ambition crack beneath him. 6 months later, I wasn't pushing a cart anymore. I had an office with a view, a salary that matched my education, and a staff looking to me for guidance. The hotel expanded, new floors opened, investors poured in. And Carlos? He got shuffled into night operations, a quiet demotion with no audience. Sometimes we ride the same elevator, and he keeps his head down, but once he muttered an apology. I told him, they weren't lost years. They were an investment in patience. And I believed it. Because the truth is, revenge doesn't always come with fireworks. Sometimes the sweetest justice is simply standing in the light you were denied, showing the world what it missed while it was too busy looking past you. So here's the question I leave with you: is that justice, or was it luck? Should someone like Carlos ever get a second chance after years of prejudice? Or is losing power the only lesson that sticks? Drop your thoughts below. I want to hear every angle because these stories aren't just mine. They belong to all of us who've been underestimated. And maybe, just maybe, it's time we stop being invisible.